Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the ice, here on Amateur Sports TV. Joining me today, I've got the great Jamie Leach and also Anna Rosner, who is the author and working with Jamie on this book called Journeyman, which is a story of Jamie's life, basically from the time he could wear skates up into his first NHL goal. Such an amazing career Jamie has had on and off the ice, but more importantly, how this story has been developed by the author, Anna, and how it relates to a certain age group, and how much and how important of a role model Jamie has been during his career, after his career, and we know how important his philanthropic messages have been since he's been involved here in Manitoba and all over North America. So please welcome Anna Rosner and Jamie Leach on the ice. Joining me, like I said, Jamie and Anna, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy days. I love the picture in the background, Jamie. That's quite an influential picture considering what's going on over this past couple of days and what Bobby's been saying, but we'll leave that out of the way. But that goal, do you remember that watching that goal live or where you were when that goal was occurring?
I'm not even sure how old I was when that goal was scored. I was pretty young. That was given to me by my dad for a Christmas present years ago, which was really kind of cool. Sometimes Reggie gives me some really neat gifts, and that was definitely one of them.
Fabulous. Anna, thank you for joining us as well. You are the author of Journeyman, correct? Tell us a little bit about your background as a writer and how this project began.
I've always written children's stories, I think, mostly with my son in mind. And this was my first serious project. I really wanted to write a story for the children I was working with in my non-for-profit. And I was looking for someone inspirational, and I stumbled upon Jamie after speaking to his father first. So.
You just stumbled upon Jamie. He's just one of those guys you just trip over, right?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. I actually spoke to Reggie about a different project, and I was eventually led to Jamie. And the more I learned about his story, the more I thought he was perfect because, he had such an interesting beginning, and because, of all of the difficulties he had faced, I think, through his career. And I also love the fact that he had devoted himself to children as an adult through his program, Shoot to Score. So he had everything going for him, as far as I'm concerned, for a children's book.
Absolutely. Now, Jamie, this story goes from basically when you began skating or just about to put skates on to your first NHL goal, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So, we've talked earlier, you grew up in the States, but you traveled a lot with Dad. You had a lot of hockey influences in your life. We all hear about how wonderful the hockey life is. But what were the stories like for you reminiscing as a youngster growing up in that type of atmosphere?
Well, the stories are pretty special now. Growing up was just the norm. It was norm having, it's funny how you referenced the picture behind me. Bobby Orr actually babysat me a few times when I was a baby, and but that was just that was the norm. It was the norm having Bernie Pront come over and Bobby Clark come over and all these different superstars back then, and so growing up was just part of my everyday life. But being an adult now, it makes me appreciate it that much more how special it was. I get to hang with these guys and not in the locker room, not when they let their hair down, right? And when they were just being, my dad's friends and teammates. So I actually got to see a part of a lot of these players that people wouldn't see.
You say it's normal, but that's not normal, Jamie. Saying those Bobby Clark, Bobby Orr, Esposito, all those guys' names you mentioned, that's not normal for a lot of kids. And when you mention that and you grew up with that, you probably thought it was normal because you didn't know anything different, right? And now when you work with your Shoot to Score programs, how important are those stories to you, not to tell, but to use as a reference, saying, these can be certain goals you have as young kids as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. I said, yeah, you hit it on the head, Theo. It was normal because that was just my every normal day life, and what's really cool now, and is when I get to see, the Bobby Clarks and those guys when I get together for, even some alumni events that I do. I was so fortunate enough to hang with the great Del Howardchuk. Right. We hung around for a number of days during one of our tours, and just to use those experiences and trying to pass along my knowledge and share some of their knowledge with some of the youth that we get to work with now is really kind of special. And so one thing that I try and do is I try and when I do talk to the youth is maybe bring a little different perspective. And hey, I had a great journey. I had a great some role models that I looked up to, and to have these youth achieve their goals, you've got to have goals, and you have to have some role models that they look up to. So I definitely have that, and hopefully the youth that I deal with can do that as well.
You talk about role models, Jamie. How the importance of a role model to both men and women, young men, young women, is blank. Fill in the blank for me.
Oh, you had to throw a tough one at me too.
Sorry, I got to be difficult today, Jamie.
You know what? It's just for me, how people carry themselves. The decisions they make. One thing that I really enjoy doing with Shoots for Hockey is being mentors to other coaches and help them out. And even when I'm talking to to people that I think are my role models, I'm like a little kid. I'm asking a lot of questions. How do you feel about this situation? It was so special. We got to spend a little bit of time with Bobby Clark when we were up in Flin Flon doing a camp, and he kind of let his hair down, talking about some of the some of the things that the Flyers do when they talk about their prospects coming up, and it's a different outlook that something that maybe I wouldn't never think of. And even when even with the coaches that I work with, I always ask them different things, and I want to know what they're doing, and so I can learn from them. I mean, getting back to your question, the role models for me is someone that I definitely look up to. I definitely want to emulate myself after, but even more importantly, just to learn from them.
Yeah. Anna, before you spoke with Jamie, did you know anything about his career?
Truth, no. No, I didn't.
It was a blank white piece of paper.
I'm so sorry, no. But I have to say my hockey knowledge in general isn't great. It's a lot better now. I've been living as a hockey mom for probably 8 years now. Both my boys, meaning my husband and my son, are huge hockey fans. And my husband actually watched the Leafs win the 1962 Cup sitting on his mother's knee, because that was allowed back then, and has been a fan pretty much ever since. So,
I love how you say when you were allowed back then, because not many fans sat for Leafs games, and there's not many Leafs playoffs, right?
I know.
We won't get into that. Although, I'm also going to ask you, Jamie and I are follically challenged. When did you see Jamie with his hair down during this whole process?
Jamie with his hair down. A lot of it took place through emails, and I think he was able to kind of tap into all those feelings from his youth. And I pushed a little bit too, trying to get all his secrets. So he was able to describe his feelings and his disappointment, especially when things weren't going right. And even his family life as well. I think he was able to express that well. So
your background in hockey wasn't the greatest, but at the same time, you knew you had this person, Jamie Leach, to tell a story with. And how were you able to devise, a plot, or how were you able to put together this book in the way that you wanted to see it tell a great story?
Yeah, it really was piecing together sort of numerous aspects of his life and using different sources. Isabel, his mother, was a huge help to me. And she was especially good at remembering Jamie's childhood. And I used HockeyDB. I used a lot of databases, and I started looking at newspaper articles, archived newspaper articles as well. And of course, Jamie's memories too. So all of this came together, and I kind of had to weave things together to form a narrative and follow his chronology. That was one of the most difficult parts of the story, in fact, was getting the chronology right and figuring out exactly how old he was at a certain point, because generally your memory says, oh, I was probably 13, 14, but I had to know exactly how old he was. So, I used like birthday websites to try and figure out how old he was at a certain time in his life. And so the chronology was a challenge, but I think in the end, I just picked the best stories, I hope, from his life, and they became the subject of the book.
So Anna, in your eyes, what were some of the highlights of Jamie's young career before he made it to the NHL?
Before the NHL, I think, he was drafted and then played for the World Junior Hockey Championships. And I think that was a kind of amazing experience. Something Jamie, you could probably talk about it better than I could, but something that isn't in the book is that Jamie almost didn't play because of an injury. I think that's right, Jamie. You had a bad calf or Charlie horse or something like that, and it almost...
I got two of them in like the first couple of games of the World Juniors, right? And I almost never finished the tournament. Yeah.
Yeah, so that didn't make it in there, but I think it's interesting. It just shows his sort of character that he was pushing, even through injury, and playing for Canada when he was in fact a U.S. more a U.S. citizen, I think, than a Canadian citizen. But
I'm going to ask this question to Jamie. Jamie, did you find it awkward? I don't know if we talked about this before, but living in the States and then playing for Team Canada, how was that adversity, being selected to that team in that certain circumstance? Usually it's just, nowadays it's normal because we see a lot of Division I players, USHL players, perhaps playing for Team Canada. But back then it wasn't very often where you saw a player living in the States and then being selected to a Team Canada squad.
So what happened? That whole scenario? I can't remember who was coaching the American team that year, the U.S. team. But they called my coach Bill LaForge when I was in Niagara Falls, and they asked me if I could play for them. And Bill LaForge said, "Well, no, he's looking at playing for Team Canada. They've asked him to come to camp, and then." Be that how Bill LaForge did things, he picked up the phone and called Tom Webster, who was our coach with the World Junior team, and he said, "Hey, the U.S. team wants Jamie to play for them," and so he kind of used the one against the other, and kind of almost and Coach told me this after that I was pretty well on the team before I even left for camp because I was supposed to maybe go play for the United States, but I didn't have a U.S. passport. So there was no way I was going to play for the United States anyway. So it's funny how things kind of go. Coach Bill LaForge kind of used that as leverage to help me play for the national team. So
you said the right word, leverage. That is probably the best piece of leverage. Classic leverage, high school playground leverage, if you will. I'm going to pick this guy. You better put him there. You better put him before I put him there. Good work. And talk to me real quick about the importance of having Reggie Leach as a role model and Jamie Leach as a role model for the Indigenous communities and all hockey communities, really, with the work that they do and the work you've now know through Shoot to Score.
I think it's a wonderful program, and I know that children look forward to it. In fact, by pure coincidence, Jamie and I actually work in some of the same communities in Manitoba, and I think having them there is a highlight of the year for some kids who love hockey. And Reggie also acts as a life coach as well, and talks to them about some of the struggles that they are facing and that he has faced in his life. And I think it makes he sort of is very human in those milieus, and he's a real connection for the children, and they can look up to him because he's had so much success in his life and is willing to talk about some of his struggles very openly. And that's important for children to hear, that we make mistakes as adults, because I think sometimes they think that we're, flawless, when in fact we're struggling just as much. So
you mentioned that idea of understanding and knowing the struggles. I've spoken with Jamie several times. You've spoken to him many times. The word humble comes to mind when I see Jamie in front of an audience, or I see him in front of a group of young players or young members of a community. Anna, what part of you strikes Jamie as being that humble leader that just everybody gravitates to and appreciates the time and the energy he spends, knowing that that is the real Jamie Leach in front of you, not some person that's on a pedestal?
yeah, I see that humility as well, definitely. He's always one to talk about his teammates' successes. And I think as a child, something which is in the book is that his mother said to him, I want you to be a good hockey player, but I really want you to be a good person even more. And I think that's become sort of a part of who he is. Yes, I'm a hockey player, but at the same time, I want to do the right things and make a difference in children's lives. And I think it's, his mom instilled that in him from a very young age, and he carried that with him throughout his career.
We're going to take a quick break with Jamie and Anna. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the program and the audience for which this book has been most requested to, and it's flying off the shelves at Mcnally. So we'll come right back here on the ice. Back with Jamie and Anna, talking about Journeyman, the life of Red Jamie Leach before the NHL. Humble, humility, role model, real, natural. All these words describe you, Jamie. What word have we left out? A good hockey player, a grinder.
Yeah, I think a grinder is probably, that kind of describes my career. One thing that I always kind of instilled in myself, and what I talk about a lot now is the two things that we can control in our lives, are our attitude and how hard we work. And that's something that I talk to a lot about, not just hockey players, even if I go to schools and talk to students, I talk a lot about that. And I think what made me get to my success in hockey was just simply I wasn't going to get outworked. There's one thing that I would not let anyone else do is outwork me. And when I was playing over in Britain, one thing in Britain, it was kind of a different scenario. After every game, there was like a little pub that was next to the rink, and before you got in the bus and went back to say Nottingham, the teams all kind of went in, at least I had a beer before we kind of took off. And I was talking to one of the players that played for another team. He came over. He goes, "Man, I hate playing against you because you just never stop, right? Right? You just keep coming back, keep coming back, and that really was probably one of the nicest things that someone's ever said to me. I hate playing against you, right? And just because I kept working hard. And so I think grinder is probably something that probably describes me to a T, for sure.
Yeah, definitely grind it out. Anna, what did you get to learn most about Jamie throughout this whole process?
Most. I think I learned that I admired him, and I always thought, Jamie. I don't think I told you this, but I always thought Jamie's the kind of guy who would help you move. The first guy who would pick up your couch and carry it if you needed him to. So I think that everything about him impressed me. His work ethic and his dedication, as I mentioned, to children, and I just, as I mentioned, I felt he was the perfect choice for this book.
How long did this book take from start to finish for you, Anna?
Probably a couple of years, and I will admit it sat in a drawer for a while too. So we started, and Jamie and I were sort of unsure of the publication. We didn't know, it's the first book, so we didn't know if it would be accepted or not. And in the end, we were very lucky. But it took some time and a lot of thinking and a lot of editing as well, a lot of cutting. And there were some, chapters that were not in existence 6 months ago that I actually wrote fairly recently because my editor was sort of insisting that they had to be written. So I listened to her, and Jamie's mother too, as I mentioned, was a good editor as well. And I think it's better now. So.
I think we could all say that a great hockey family needs a good hockey mom to keep us grounded, correct?
Ask Jamie, yeah.
I'm a firm believer of being a student athlete, and without my mom, I probably wouldn't have had the student part of the athlete part, if that makes any sense. She kept it grounded. She kept us in the books, and it helped knowing that you had someone that kept the glue together. That's what the mom kind of did while dad drove the 6 a.m. practice or got you to the camps, right? And we're able to bring over the friends and whatnot. So, Mom, all the hockey moms out there, definitely, you're not forgotten by any means. And we definitely love everything that you do. Anna, this book is at Mcnally Robinson. It is #1 right now on the teen section. Did you ever expect that in a bookstore?
I didn't know what to expect really, especially with the pandemic. But I'm thrilled that it's doing well. And, I think also Jamie's fan base is interested in the book, and adults seem to be interested in it, which is great. Not just children. It's geared towards children who are about, 10 to 12 or somewhere around there. So I'm thrilled that it's sort of generating some interest.
And it's a great book for youngsters to read as not an early chapter book, but something that begins to put together stories and plots and understanding, the battles that Jamie faced, both good and bad, leading up to his career. And I know he's wearing a Pittsburgh Penguins shirt now. He's hiding it. But, his days with Pittsburgh, conflict right there, having a dad playing for Philly and he's playing for Pittsburgh. That's like oil and water in a soup bowl, right?
Well, I've won lots of suppers from Reggie over the last 10 years of how many times the Penguins would beat the Flyers in the playoffs. So I think that's going to start changing in a few years. So
I think it will. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, one thing when the Flyers and the Penguins always face each other in playoffs, the first thing we do is contact each other. Hey, are you going to have a bet again? And so. Yeah, I'm about 5-0 right now.
5-0. You are. That's right. I think you're also 1-0 in the mascot option there. I think Grady's got a little more oomph than the Penguin guy.
I agree. Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Talking about mascots, role models again, Reggie, Jamie. Sorry, I'm gonna get this right. I promise. Jamie and Anna. Are role models different for Indigenous cultures and people that live in smaller communities, or do they have the same role models as people that live in Toronto or Vancouver or Philadelphia?
Jamie, you want to field that one?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of both. There's no doubt. You go to these communities and, especially now, you're going to see lots of Bear jerseys and, the relevant, current First Nation players. There's no doubt. But we go up there and we see a ton of Crosby jerseys all the time. We see a ton of, especially in the West, McDavid jerseys. Absolutely. So obviously, I think more of the First Nation community does follow, our First Nation players, but they're like everyone else. They like a good hockey player, which is good. You know what's happening now, which is really really nice, is we're seeing lots of our First Nation players just starting to get an opportunity, which I'm really happy about, and the opportunity like the correct opportunity. Like they're actually seeing some good ice. They're seeing some good responsibility on the ice, which is great to see. I'm so proud of our First Nation guys, how well they're doing, and hopefully they can keep it up. But yeah, and wherever we go, they're fans of good hockey players. Obviously, a lot of them like the First Nation players do well, but it doesn't really matter.
No, and getting the exposure up there has been helped tremendously over the last decade, because a lot of those players that are having those opportunities are now going to a college after high school, or now going to the WHL ranks, not just because of, certain aspects of their game that are more gritty, but we're starting to see some talented sticks. We're starting to see some hard hitters, some hard shooters from all communities, really all different communities. I think that's fantastic, because we're starting to see the diversity of hockey and where hockey has stretched to all over this great nation. And I want to finish up with this, the topic with you on this project, this nonprofit you work with called Books with Wings. Can you tell us a little bit about that initiative you've been working with?
Yes. So we've been, I think, in operation for 10 years, almost exactly. And we've sent 18,000 brand new books to children on isolated reserves. And I was 10 years ago, I was volunteering for a different non-for-profit and helping them write grants. And I became very familiar with some of the issues that children faced. And something that really struck me was that there was no public library. And, very few children had their own little library at home. And I was watching my own son and seeing what he was learning from books. He would pick up expressions, and I could just see, the development that was coming directly from reading. And, truly it broke my heart to think of any kid without his or her own library. And so I just began the project myself. I think I mentioned in an article, it just appeared in the Toronto Star, that my mother-in-law paid for the first box, and I think my mother-in-law paid for the second box of books. And then, things just started sort of rolling from there, and we got more volunteers and more sponsors. And, we currently are working with 4 schools in Manitoba and 1 in BC, but we've been a little bit everywhere. But I try to stay with the schools long term, because I want to make a big impact, in a small area, rather than distributing 1 book to 10,000 kids. I want 1,000 kids to have 10 books, so they have, a real library at home.
A much needed resource everywhere you go. A computer does not do it justice. Picking up a physical book and reading it and seeing the pictures, it's really amazing. As is this book, Journeyman. Jamie, how do we get a signed copy?
Well, I believe you can go to the Shoot to Score Hockey website if you want, but you also go to Anna would know more about that. Where Amazon has it, correct, Anna? And who else is carrying it?
Amazon.ca and in the States as well, and Mcnally's.
McNally.
And it's at some bookstores in Toronto as well, I think, and Barnes & Noble in the States. You can pretty much find it in any country, but it'll probably take a while to get there.
I'm going to ask you this question, Anna, as a writer, how great would it be to have a resource like this in middle year schools in Manitoba or across the country as part of their reading list in public schools or private schools?
Oh, well, that would be fantastic. I would love that. And hopefully it'd be of interest to everyone, especially children who aren't hockey fans. I guess that's the challenge there. But that would be wonderful.
Jamie, I look forward to hearing how this book, I'm going to pick this book up and start reading it. I'm going to check the chronological ordering, Anna. I'm going to have to see what happens in that story. He's probably got some good ones in there. I want to thank both of you very much for joining me. Books with Wings is the non-for-profit. The book is called Journeyman, the story of Jamie Leach before getting to the NHL. Found in Mcnally Robinson's Amazon. Go check it out. It's a great read. And it fits nicely in a Christmas or a wonderful stocking under the tree. It's not a big book. It's nice and little. You can carry it around.
Yeah.
Great writing, and something that a lot of kids, I think, will enjoy. So, Jamie, any last words before we say goodbye?
No, thank you, Anna. She was great to work with. Book is fantastic, and really happy with it. Thank you very much.
Oh, it was a pleasure for me. A real pleasure.
And it was a pleasure having both of you here today on the ice. Thank you so much. Hopefully stay safe, stay healthy, both of you, and to you and your families. And hopefully we get to see hockey again soon here in Winnipeg, right, Jamie?
I hope so.
I hope so. Thumbs up on that. On the ice here, Amateur Sports TV, joined by Anna Rosner. Did I say your last name right, Anna? Is it
Almost?
Is it Rosner?
Rosner, yeah.
I do apologize.
I'll take it. It's good.
Say my last name right, and I'll be happy with it too. Theo Tutkaluk here with you, Amateur Sports TV, Anna Rosner, and Jamie Leach, not his dad, Reggie Leach. Jamie Leach here, and we love having you guys here. Watch for the show Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Goodbye.